The courthouse doors felt heavier than they should have, solid oak that whispered of judgment and finality. Celestine Aurora Blackwell pushed through them on a crystalline morning in March 2024, her heels clicking against marble floors that had witnessed 1,000 verdicts, 1,000 lives irrevocably altered by the swing of a gavel. She was 32 years old, wearing a charcoal suit she'd bought specifically for this day, her dark hair pulled back in a way that said professional, but couldn't quite hide the exhaustion etched into the fine lines around her eyes. In her leather portfolio, she carried documents that reduced a lifetime of pain into legal terminology, exhibits, affidavits, evidence of absence carefully cataloged like museum artifacts of a childhood that had never quite been. The hallway smelled of floor polish and anxiety. Other cases churned through other courtrooms: divorces, custody battles, probate disputes, the machinery of justice grinding through human complexity with bureaucratic efficiency. But Courtroom 4B belonged to her story today, Blackwell vs. Blackwell and Montgomery. Her name against theirs, as if they'd ever really been connected by anything, more than biology and a shared surname she'd legally kept only because changing. It felt like letting them erase her entirely. She paused outside the courtroom door, hand on the brass handle, feeling her pulse in her throat. Through the narrow window, she could see them already seated, Richard and Lorraine, her father and mother, though those words felt foreign in her mouth, like trying to speak a language she'd never properly learned. They sat on the plaintiff's side with their attorney, a man named Gregory Sutherland who'd made a career out of estate litigation and looked exactly like someone who'd spend his life arguing over other people's money. Richard wore an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, the picture of distinguished success. Lorraine had chosen cream-colored linen, pearls at her throat, her expression serene and vaguely martyred, the look of a woman who'd convinced herself she was the victim of this story. Celestine's attorney, Patricia Reeves, was already inside, arranging documents with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Patricia was 58, brilliant, and had taken Celestine's case pro bono after hearing the details, saying simply, "This is the kind of fight that matters." Celestine took one more breath and opened the door. The eye roll heard round the courtroom. The moment she entered, Richard and Lorraine turned. Their expressions cycled through recognition, annoyance, and then something darker, a dismissiveness so complete it manifested physically. They rolled their eyes, both of them, in perfect synchronization, as if they'd rehearsed this particular gesture of contempt. As if her presence here was an inconvenience, an embarrassment, a tedious obligation they had to endure before returning to their actual lives. Celestine felt the gesture like a slap, sharp and stinging. 32 years of being invisible, being inconvenient, being fundamentally unwanted, distilled into that single, synchronized eye roll. But something else happened in that moment. Judge Miriam Castellanos, who'd been reviewing documents at the bench, looked up at precisely the wrong or right moment. She saw the eye roll, saw the casual cruelty of it, the practiced dismissiveness. The judge's expression shifted, not dramatically, but noticeably if you were paying attention. Her jaw tightened. Something moved behind her eyes, a flicker of recognition or perhaps memory. Her gaze moved from Richard and Lorraine to Celestine. Assessment sharp and immediate, Celestine saw it happen. The judge, who was supposed to be neutral, who was supposed to weigh evidence without bias, had just witnessed something that couldn't be documented in any legal brief. The texture of their relationship, the truth of how they regarded their own daughter. She walked to the defendant's table and sat beside Patricia, who squeezed her hand briefly under the table. "They just made a mistake," Patricia whispered. "Did you see the judge's face?" Celestine nodded, not trusting her voice. Judge Castellanos called the court to order, her voice carrying the authority of 2 decades on the bench. "We're here today for Blackwell vs. Blackwell and Montgomery. Case number CV 2024-08847. This is a dispute regarding the estate of Vivian Adelaide Montgomery, deceased August 2023. Mr. Sutherland, you may present your opening statement." Gregory Sutherland stood, all calculated charm and practiced gravitas. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. My clients, Richard Blackwell and Lorraine Montgomery Blackwell, are contesting the will of Mrs. Vivian Adelaide Montgomery, Mrs. Blackwell's mother. The will, executed in June 2023, left the entirety of Mrs. Montgomery's estate, valued at approximately $2.8 million, to her granddaughter, Celestine Blackwell, while explicitly excluding her own daughter from any inheritance. He paused for effect, letting the apparent injustice of it settle. Mrs. Montgomery's decision was made under circumstances we believe constitute undue influence. The defendant, Ms. Celestine Blackwell, was the primary caregiver during Mrs. Montgomery's final years and had both access and opportunity to manipulate an elderly woman suffering from declining health. We're asking the court to set aside this will and distribute the estate according to California intestacy laws, which would grant Mrs. Blackwell her rightful share as the surviving daughter. Sutherland sat, confident in his narrative. Young woman manipulates dying grandmother. Virtuous parents seek justice. Patricia Reeves rose, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Your Honor, Mr. Sutherland's characterization would be compelling if it bore any resemblance to reality. The truth, which we will demonstrate through extensive documentation, is far different. Vivienne Montgomery was not manipulated. She was, in fact, making the most deliberate choice of her life, to leave her estate to the person who'd actually been her family, not by blood, but by presence. To the granddaughter who spent 15 years showing up when her own daughter couldn't be bothered, Patricia's voice carried steel wrapped in silk. This case isn't about undue influence. It's about two parents who abandoned their daughter emotionally from childhood, who were functionally absent from her life for 3 decades, and who now want to profit from a relationship they never cultivated. We will show that Vivienne Montgomery's will reflects her lived experience. Celestine was her daughter in every meaningful sense, and she had every right to leave her estate accordingly. Judge Castellanos nodded slowly, her expression unreadable but attentive. We'll proceed with testimony. Mr. Sutherland, call your first witness. Part 1. The Architecture of Absence Lorraine. Montgomery Blackwell took the stand first, sworn in with a hand on the Bible and an expression of wounded dignity that looked rehearsed but not quite believable. Under Sutherland's careful questioning, she painted a picture of a devoted mother tragically estranged from her ungrateful daughter by circumstances beyond her control. Celestine was always a difficult child, Lorraine testified, her voice carrying just the right note of sadness. Demanding, emotional, never satisfied with what we could give her. Richard and I both had demanding careers. I was building my interior design business. He was establishing his medical practice. We did our best, but Celestine seemed determined to push us away. Can you describe your relationship with your mother, Vivienne Montgomery? Sutherland asked. We were close, Lorraine said, the lie smooth as silk. She understood the pressures Richard and I faced. When Celestine started spending more time with her in high school, Mother encouraged it. She said it was good for Celestine to have family support. I had no idea she was being turned against me. When did you become aware that your mother planned to exclude you from her will? Lorraine's eyes welled with perfectly calibrated tears. After she died, when the attorney read the will, I was devastated. My own mother, leaving everything to my daughter and nothing to me. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, Patricia's objection cut through the performance. Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive and speculative. Sustained. Mrs. Blackwell, please answer only the question asked, Sutherland continued. Establishing a timeline of alleged manipulation. Celestine moving in with Vivienne during her senior year of high school in 2009. Taking control of Vivienne's finances in 2015 when she was granted power of attorney. Isolating Vivienne from her own daughter and ultimately influencing her to change her will in 2023. On paper, it almost sounded plausible. Then Patricia Reeves stood for cross-examination, and the careful construction began to crumble. Mrs. Blackwell, you testified that you and your daughter were close when she was young. Can you tell me about her childhood? Lorraine smiled uncertainly. She was a normal child. Happy, I think. You think? I'm sorry? You said you think she was happy. You're not certain? Well, children don't always express their feelings clearly. Patricia picked up a document. Let me refresh your memory. This is a report from Celestine's elementary school counselor, dated November 2001, when Celestine was 9 years old. The counselor notes that Celestine frequently comes to school in unwashed clothes, often appears hungry, and has mentioned that her parents are rarely home. Were you aware of this report? Lorraine's face flushed. That counselor overreacted. We were busy professionals, too busy to ensure your 9-year-old daughter had clean clothes and regular meals. We provided for her. Did you attend her elementary school graduation? I don't recall her middle school promotion ceremony. Mr. Sutherland, objection? Lorraine looked desperately at her attorney. I'll allow it, Judge Castellano said, her tone neutral but her attention focused. I had work commitments. Patricia placed a stack of programs on the evidence table. These are programs from every major school event, from kindergarten through 8th grade. Vivian Montgomery signed in as the attending guardian for every single one. Your name appears nowhere, not once in 9 years of schooling. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of paper. You testified that you were close with your mother. When was the last time you visited her before her death? Lorraine hesitated too long. I'm not sure of the exact date. Let me help you. According to visitor logs from her assisted living facility and later from her home nursing care, which Celestine meticulously maintained, you visited your mother exactly 4 times in the last 15 years of her life. 4 times in 15 years. Does that sound close to you? I had obligations, more important than your dying mother. Objection? Sutherland was on his feet. Argumentative. Withdrawn, Patricia said smoothly. Mrs. Blackwell, you mentioned that Celestine was a difficult child. Can you describe specific incidents that made her difficult? Lorraine floundered. She was always complaining that we weren't around enough. Very needy. A child wanting her parents' presence is being needy. She didn't understand our responsibilities. Did you attend her high school graduation? We had a conflict. Her college graduation? Silence. For the record, Your Honor, the answer is no to both. But Vivian Montgomery attended both ceremonies. Vivian also paid for Celestine's college education at UCLA after the plaintiffs declined to contribute. We have documentation of every tuition payment. Patricia let that sink in before continuing. Mrs. Blackwell, you claim your daughter manipulated your mother. Can you provide any specific examples of manipulation? She kept mother from seeing us. Did she prevent you from visiting? Well, no, but did she screen your phone calls? Not exactly. Did she ever tell you that you couldn't see your mother? She made it uncomfortable. By being there? By actually caring for your mother when you couldn't be bothered? Objection? Sustained. Ms. Reeves, rephrase. Patricia nodded. Mrs. Blackwell, the truth is that you simply didn't visit, correct? Your daughter didn't prevent anything. You just didn't show up. Lorraine's composed facade cracked completely. You don't understand what it was like. The pressure, the demands on our time. I understand perfectly, Patricia said coldly. You had a daughter and a mother who needed you, and you chose your career and your social life instead. And now that there's money involved, you've decided to show up. 32 years late. That's not fair. No further questions. Lorraine stepped down from the witness stand looking significantly less composed than when she'd taken it. Her wounded dignity replaced by something closer to genuine distress. Richard Blackwell was called next. Part 2. The Physician's Absence, Doctor. Richard Blackwell carried himself with the authority of a man accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. A cardiac surgeon, he'd built a successful practice and a reputation for excellence. He took the stand with the confident air of someone who'd testified as an expert witness before and considered himself above the messy emotions of family drama. Under Sutherland's questioning, he presented as the reasonable parent, the steady presence, the one who'd provided financial stability even if he couldn't always be physically present. I worked 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, Richard testified. I was saving lives. Celestine never lacked for anything material. We provided her with a good home, private school education, everything she needed. Did you have concerns about your mother-in-law's relationship with your daughter? In hindsight, yes. Vivienne seemed to encourage Celestine's resentment toward us. She never understood the demands of a surgical practice. She made us feel guilty for working hard to provide for our family. Patricia's cross-examination was surgical itself, appropriate given his profession. Dr. Blackwell, you mentioned providing everything Celestine needed. Did you attend her dance recitals? I was often in surgery. Did you attend any of her dance recitals? Yes or no? Surgery schedules are unpredictable. Yes or no, Dr. Blackwell? He looked annoyed. No. Did you teach her to ride a bike? My mother-in-law handled those activities. Did you help her with her homework? She had tutors. Did you read her bedtime stories? My wife? Your wife testified she was busy with her own career. So who exactly was parenting this child, Dr. Blackwell? His jaw tightened. We provided for her material needs. I didn't ask about material needs. I asked about actual parenting. Let me be more specific. Can you tell me the name of Celestine's pediatrician? He hesitated. I don't recall offhand. Did she have allergies? I believe you believe? You're a physician and you don't know if your own daughter had allergies? Patricia picked up another document. This is a medical history form from Celestine's College Health Center, filled out when she was 18. Under emergency contact, she listed Vivian Montgomery. Not you, not her mother. Her grandmother. Why do you think that is? She was being spiteful. Or she was being realistic. She listed the person who'd actually show up in an emergency. The person who'd been showing up her entire life. Patricia approached the witness stand. Dr. Blackwell, you mentioned working 70 to 80 hours a week. I don't dispute that surgery is demanding. But can you explain why you also spent significant time at your country club? Why you took monthly golf trips? Why you and your wife traveled to Europe twice a year without your daughter? Everyone needs recreation. Everyone needs parents, Dr. Blackwell. Celestine needed parents. She had a grandmother instead. And now that grandmother is dead, and you want to profit from a relationship you never cultivated? I loved my daughter. Love is a verb. Dr. Blackwell, it's something you do, not just something you feel. Can you point to a single consistent action over 18 years that demonstrated your love? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Can you tell me what Celestine studied in college? She went to UCLA. What did she study? I believe it was liberal arts? Social work. She studied social work with a focus on child welfare. She spent the last 10 years working with neglected children in the foster system. Did you know that? Richard's face reddened. We weren't kept informed. You weren't kept informed? Dr. Blackwell, do you have your daughter's phone number? Of course. When was the last time you called it? He couldn't answer. When was the last time you wished her happy birthday? Silence. When was the last time you asked how she was doing, what was happening in her life, whether she was happy or struggling or thriving? When, Dr. Blackwell, did you last treat her like a daughter instead of an inconvenience? Objection? Sutherland's voice carried frustration now. Your Honor, Ms. Reeves is badgering the witness. Your Honor, Patricia said calmly, I'm establishing a pattern of absence that directly relates to why Vivian Montgomery chose to leave her estate to her granddaughter rather than her daughter. This goes to the heart of the case. Judge Castellanos looked at Richard Blackwell with an expression that suggested she was forming opinions that would matter when she rendered her decision. Overruled. The witness will answer the question. Dr. Blackwell, when was the last time you had a meaningful conversation with your daughter? Richard Blackwell looked at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its confident edge. I don't remember. No further questions. Part 3. The grandmother's documentation. After a brief recess, Patricia Reeves called her first witness, Celestine herself. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking through water, every step heavy, every breath conscious. Celestine placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the chair that was still warm from her father's presence. Patricia's questions started gently, establishing the foundation of her childhood. Celestine, can you describe your living situation growing up? She took a breath, grounding herself. We lived in a 5-bedroom house in Pasadena. Beautiful neighborhood, expensive furniture, all the markers of success. But it was empty most of the time. My father was always at the hospital. My mother was either at work or at social events. I'd come home from school to an empty house, make my own dinner, put myself to bed. How old were you when this started? 6, maybe 7, as soon as they decided I was old enough to be alone. Were you afraid? The memory washed over her, being 8 years old in a dark house, jumping at every sound, eventually learning to not be afraid because fear required someone to comfort you, and no one was coming. Yes. But I learned not to show it because there was no one there to comfort me anyway. When did you start spending time with your grandmother? She started picking me up after school when I was in 3rd grade. The school called her because I'd been waiting outside for 3 hours. My parents had forgotten it was an early dismissal day. Grandma Vivian came immediately, and after that she started collecting me regularly. Did your parents object? They seemed relieved. One less thing to worry about. Patricia walked her through the timeline, How weekday afternoons at Vivian's house had stretched into weekends. How summer vacations were spent at Vivian's cottage in Santa Barbara. How eventually, at 17, Celestine had simply moved in permanently. Why did you move in with your grandmother during high school? Celestine's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Because she was the only one who noticed I existed. The only one who asked about my day, who helped with homework, who cared if I ate dinner. Living with my parents was like living with indifferent roommates. Living with Grandma Vivian was like finally having a home. Did your parents object to you moving out? No. My mother said it was probably for the best since I was always so difficult. My father said it would give me character-building independence. Neither of them tried to stop me. Patricia presented document after document, school records showing Vivian listed as emergency contact, medical records signed by Vivian, college applications with Vivian's address, bank statements showing Vivian's tuition payments. Tell me about caring for your grandmother in her final years. Celestine's eyes welled, but her voice held. She was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in 2018. The doctors said she needed someone with her full time. I moved back into her house, adjusted my work schedule to be home more. She'd spent 15 years taking care of me. It was time to take care of her. Was it difficult? It was exhausting and heartbreaking and the greatest privilege of my life. She'd shown up for every moment of my childhood. I got to show up for her. Did your mother offer to help with her care? She visited once in 2018, stayed for an hour, and said she couldn't handle seeing Mother like that. My father sent money occasionally, but never came. Tell me about the will. Celestine glanced at Vivian's attorney, Marcus Chen, who sat in the gallery. He nodded encouragingly. In May 2023, Grandma Vivian asked Marcus to come to the house. She wanted to update her will. I left the room while they talked. When Marcus left, she told me she'd made sure I'd be taken care of. That I'd never have to worry. I told her I didn't care about money. I just wanted her to be comfortable. She said, I know, sweetheart. That's exactly why you deserve it. Did you ever ask her to leave you anything? Never. I would have cared for her regardless. Why do you think she chose to exclude your mother from the will? Sutherland objected. Calls for speculation. But Judge Castellanos allowed it. Celestine looked directly at her mother for the first time since taking the stand. Because my mother was never there. For either of us. Grandma Vivian spent her last years angry, not bitter, but angry, that her daughter had essentially abandoned both of us. She said once, I don't understand how Lorraine can look at you and not see the miracle she walked away from. She left her estate to me because I was the daughter who showed up. Blood doesn't make family. Presence does. Sutherland's cross-examination was aggressive, trying to establish that Celestine had isolated Vivian, manipulated her, poisoned her against Lorraine. Isn't it true that you discouraged your grandmother from seeing your mother? No, I encouraged her to call if she wanted to. She rarely wanted to. You controlled her finances. I managed them because she asked me to. Every decision was made with her full input. Marcus can confirm. You stood to gain millions from her death. I stood to lose the person I loved most in the world. The money is meaningless compared to that. Your mother says you turned your grandmother against her. My mother did that herself by never showing up. You can't turn someone against a person who isn't there. When Celestine stepped down, Judge Castellanos' expression was thoughtful. Her earlier neutrality replaced by something that looked like carefully contained fury. Part 4. The letters. Patricia's next exhibit was devastating in its simplicity. A box of letters. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence correspondence from Vivian Montgomery to her daughter, Lorraine. Spanning from 1992 to 2022, she began reading selections aloud. December 1998. Lorraine, I'm begging you to spend Christmas with us. Celestine is 6 years old. She keeps asking why Mommy doesn't want to see her. I don't know what to tell her anymore. June 2003. You missed her elementary school graduation. She cried all night. When will she matter more than your latest project? March 2009. Celestine is moving in with me. You should be ashamed that your daughter prefers living with her elderly grandmother than in her own home. But you probably don't even notice she's gone. November 2015. I've updated my will. You won't like it, but you've made your choices clear. Celestine has been more of a daughter to me than you've been in 40 years. April 2023. I'm dying, Lorraine. I have maybe months left, You've visited once in 5 years. Celestine has been here every day, holding my hand, reading to me, making sure I'm not alone. Do you feel any regret at all? Or am I just an inconvenience to you the way your daughter has always been? Lorraine was crying openly now. Whether from shame or frustration or genuine grief was impossible to say. Patricia also entered. Vivienne's journals, 15 years of entries documenting her relationship with Celestine. The judge read selections in chambers during another recess, and when she returned, her expression had shifted from thoughtful to decided. Part 5. The character witness Patricia's final witness was Dr. Helena Okonkwo, a geriatric psychiatrist who'd treated Vivienne Montgomery from 2020 until her death. Dr. Okonkwo, did you have concerns about Mrs. Montgomery's cognitive function? None whatsoever. She remained sharp and decisive until the end. Her physical health declined, but her mind was clear. Did you ever observe interactions between Mrs. Montgomery and her granddaughter? Many times. Their relationship was beautiful, respectful, loving, genuine. Celestine treated her grandmother with remarkable patience and dignity. Did Mrs. Montgomery ever express regret about her will? No, she was very clear about her wishes. She told me once that Celestine was the daughter she'd actually raised, and she wanted to acknowledge that, legally. Did you see any evidence of manipulation or undue influence? Absolutely not. Mrs. Montgomery made her own decisions. Celestine's only influence was providing the kind of loving care that every elderly person deserves. On cross-examination, Sutherland tried to suggest that Celestine's constant presence itself constituted manipulation, but Dr. Okonkwo shut it down. Mr. Sutherland, if showing up consistently, providing care, and building a relationship over 15 years is manipulation, then we should hope everyone is manipulated that way. What I observed was genuine love, not calculation. Part 6. The judge's surprise closing arguments took place on a Friday afternoon in late March 2024. Sunlight streaming through the courtroom windows like a physical presence. Sutherland made one last attempt to frame the case as an elderly woman manipulated by a calculating granddaughter. But his words rang hollow against the weight of evidence Patricia had presented. Patricia's closing was brief and devastating. Your Honor, this case is simple. Vivienne Montgomery left her estate to the person who'd been her family. Not by blood, but by choice. By presence. By 15 years of showing up. The plaintiffs want this court to overturn that decision because they share Mrs. Montgomery's DNA. But genetics don't make family. Actions do. She gestured to Richard and Lorraine. These two people had 32 years to be parents. 32 years to notice their daughter, to show up for her, to build a relationship. They chose not to. They can't undo that absence with a lawsuit. They can't purchase with legal action what they refused to earn through love. Patricia's voice softened. Vivienne Montgomery knew exactly what she was doing when she made her will. She was rewarding presence over absence. Chosen family over biological accident. The person who loved her over the person who ignored her. This court should honor that choice. Judge Castellanos took less than an hour to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was stern, and she looked directly at Richard and Lorraine before beginning. I've been a judge for 20 years. I've seen every permutation of family dysfunction, every variation of estate dispute. But I must say, this case has troubled me more than most. Richard and Lorraine sat up straighter, perhaps taking her words as encouragement. The judge continued, and her tone turned cold. It has troubled me because I have rarely seen such a clear example of parents failing so completely at their most basic obligation. The evidence presented in this courtroom paints a devastating picture of neglect. Not criminal neglect, perhaps, but moral neglect of the most profound kind. She looked at the documents before her. Mrs. Blackwell, Dr. Blackwell, you had a daughter. You provided her with material comfort, but no emotional support. You gave her a house, but no home. You were present physically on occasion, but absent in every meaningful sense. And when your daughter found the love and family she needed in her grandmother, you were relieved to be unburdened. Richard's face had gone pale. Lorraine was crying again, but quietly now. Vivienne Montgomery documented 15 years of parenting a child who wasn't technically hers to raise. She attended school events, paid for education, provided emotional support, and ultimately gave Celestine the one thing you never did: unconditional love and consistent presence. Judge Castellanos picked up Vivian's will. You argue that Mrs. Montgomery was unduly influenced. The evidence shows the opposite. She made a clear-eyed assessment of who her real daughter was, the one who showed up, and she left her estate accordingly. There is no legal principle that requires a parent to leave money to adult children, especially adult children who've demonstrated 3 decades of disinterest. She looked at Celestine. Ms. Blackwell, your grandmother chose you because you earned that choice. Not through manipulation, but through love. The law recognizes that property owners have the right to distribute their estates as they see fit. Your grandmother exercised that right wisely. The gavel came down. The will of Vivian Adelaide Montgomery is upheld in its entirety. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the court finds this claim to have been brought in bad faith and awards attorney's fees to the defendant. We're adjourned. Epilogue. Outside the courtroom, Celestine stood on the courthouse steps, late afternoon sun warm on her face. Patricia stood beside her, briefcase in hand, looking satisfied. You okay? Patricia asked. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. Richard and Lorraine emerged moments later with Sutherland, all 3 looking defeated. They walked past without acknowledgement, just as they'd walked past Celestine for 32 years. But this time, Celestine called out, Mom! Dad! They stopped, turned slowly. Celestine walked over, standing close enough to see the fine lines around her mother's eyes. The gray threaded through her father's silver hair. They looked older than she'd realized. Smaller somehow. I don't hate you, she said quietly. I wish I did. It would be simpler. But I just feel sorry for you. You missed everything. Every moment of my childhood, every milestone, every chance to actually know me. You missed Grandma Vivian's last years where she was funny and wise and so full of love. You missed all of it because you couldn't be bothered to show up. Lorraine opened her mouth to respond, but Celestine continued. The money doesn't matter. It never mattered. What matters is that Grandma Vivian saw me. She knew me. She loved me not because she had to, but because she chose to. Every single day she chose me. That's what you walked away from. Not money, but the chance to know your own daughter. Richard's eyes were wet. Celestine, I hope you use this as a wake-up call. I hope you examine your lives and your choices and realize what you've lost. Not the money. Me. You lost me. And you can't sue your way back into a relationship you never built. She turned and walked down the courthouse steps to where Patricia was waiting. Behind her, she heard her mother begin to sob, real crying this time. The sound of actual grief. Celestine didn't look back. 3 months later, Celestine used part of her inheritance to establish the Vivian Montgomery Foundation, providing resources for kinship caregivers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, family friends who stepped in to raise children when parents couldn't or wouldn't. She kept Vivian's house in Santa Barbara, the cottage where she'd spent her happiest childhood summers. On the mantel, she placed a photograph of Vivian from Christmas 2022, her last Christmas, smiling at the camera with Celestine's arms around her shoulders. Beneath it, she placed a small brass plaque with words from one of Vivian's letters. Family is not who gave you life. It's who chose to live in yours. Richard and Lorraine never contacted her again, and Celestine found she didn't miss them. You can't miss what was never really there.